And joining me now is Republican Congressman Devin Nunes. He's the chairman of the House Select Committee on Intelligence. Mr. Chairman, thanks so much for being here.
It's great to be back with you.
So I know you can't tell us things that are classified, but in terms of the threat from North Korea, what do you think about North Korea's nuclear capabilities as of now? Could they fire a nuke and hit our soldiers in South Korea or Japan? Could they fire a nuke and hit the U.S.?
Well, North Korea is destabilizing the region. They continue to develop their capabilities, ballistic capabilities. We saw a few years ago where they shot a ballistic missile about 1,000 miles. We believe that they can definitely threaten the United States. And so what we have to do is we have to be supportive of our South Korean allies and our Japanese allies to make sure that we are the deterrent in the region, because with this regime, they're very unpredictable and we don't know what they could possibly do. The good thing is that we have a significant force structure in that area if they did try something stupid.
When you say threaten the United States, do you mean they could theoretically hit some part of the United States, whether it's Hawaii or?
I think the answer is we don't really know yet, but you know, we know that they have nuclear capability, and we know they've been able to fire missiles long distances. So I think it's one of those things we really hope that they don't try it. But the more that they practice, the better that they get.
Let's turn to terrorism. 3 additional men were today charged in connection with the terrorist attacks in Brussels and Paris. According to this new threat assessment from the House Homeland Security Committee, 5,000 Europeans have traveled to fight with ISIS, and more than 1,000 have returned to Europe. Given the concerns we have in the U.S. about how much information the Europeans do not share, and also, of course, the visa waiver program with the Europeans, how concerned are you that some of these Westerners from Europe, some of these Europeans trained to fight with ISIS, are going to end up in the United States?
So what I'd like to first start out with is say that when you talk about the 5,000, those are the ones that we actually know about that are in Europe.
There might be more.
Well, my guess is there's a lot more, a whole bunch more. And then those pockets of cells of fighters that have experience, that probably have links back to ISIS or Al-Qaeda affiliates and some type of command and control structure, then when you put the refugees on top of that, that don't have any jobs, it becomes a breeding ground for radicalism. And so what I worry about is the fighters that came back that we know about, the ones that we don't know about, and then the radicalization of a population of what is now in the several million.
You just returned from a congressional delegation trip all over the world, but focused on the Middle East. You visited Egypt and Israel, 2 important American allies. How concerned are the Egyptians and the Israelis about the presence of ISIS in the Sinai Peninsula? And do you think the U.S. military should beef up its presence there?
So when you look at Egypt, has always worried me, because Egypt is almost 100 million people. And when people talk about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they often think, well, that's in Iraq and Syria. And the administration's put in like a containment policy and have ignored the Sinai that you brought up. But I think more importantly, they've ignored Libya and the rest of North Africa, where there are pockets of Al-Qaeda and ISIS affiliates all over. So Egypt, 100 million people, very poor, squeezed on one side of the Sinai with ISIS presence, and the other side with Libya with significant ISIS presence. I've always said that if you want a successful strategy to defeat ISIS and Al-Qaeda, it has to involve not just Iraq and Syria, but also North Africa.
Many top Pentagon officials say Russia actually is the threat that the United States should worry about the most. I want to get your reaction to something that President Obama told Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic. Quote, "The notion that somehow Russia is in a stronger position now in Syria or in Ukraine than they were before they had invaded Ukraine or before he had to deploy military forces to Syria is to fundamentally misunderstand the nature of power in foreign affairs or in the world generally." What do you think?
The biggest intelligence failure that we've had since 9/11 has been the inability to predict the leadership plans and intentions of the Putin regime in Russia. And so I can understand why after the Georgia invasion, maybe we thought some diplomacy might work. But clearly after the invasion of Crimea, that should have been a red line. And we immediately should have moved quickly in to bolster our NATO allies. But instead, we continued to negotiate with the Russians. We continued to talk to the Russians. And then they invaded eastern Ukraine. We missed that. And then we completely missed entirely when they put a new base, moved a new base with aircraft into the Mediterranean, into Syria. We just were blind. The intelligence community has continued to get this wrong. And look, I think it's all of us are to blame, right? I think the White House is to blame. I think Congress is to blame. I think many of our allies are to blame because we misjudged Putin for many, many years.
All right. Chairman of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Devin Nunes, Congressman from California. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.